You could have watched this video a day early. Check out my Patreon for more details. Keyboards. They're a kind of tool that pretty much everybody uses like every day in their lives, but I hardly ever see anyone put any real effort into their keyboard. But why is that? You know, that's actually an interesting question to ask. If a keyboard is a tool that we use pretty much every day, why wouldn't you put any extra effort into it? Why wouldn't you try to make it better? Anytime I ask this question to anybody who uses a keyboard regularly, they'll just look at me and say, well, you know, I spent 20 bucks on this keyboard at Best Buy, and it's good enough. It's got all the keys I need, it feels just fine, and whatever, who cares? It's a keyboard. You don't really need to put a whole lot of effort into it, right? But then I see other people who think like, oh, you know, I bought the latest of the Logitech keyboards or the Corsair keyboards or the Blackmagic keyboards and think that that's good enough, that this is the peak of keyboards, that you're not using a membrane keyboard, so automatically you're doing better, right? And a lot of these keyboards are actually of pretty good quality. You know, they're not perfect, but they're definitely better than a membrane. But what if I told you that we could go much deeper? What if I told you that you could build your own custom mechanical keyboard? That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Custom mechanical keyboards are a pretty niche hobby that I've recently delved into headfirst, as you can see with my custom built keyboard. And yeah, you read the title right of this video. This keyboard costs roughly $350. Why on earth would you spend that much on a keyboard? But it doesn't matter what the price is. All that matters is that you get a luxurious, fully custom experience when you're typing funny memes on Discord chats. Memes aside, custom mechanical keyboards, I feel, are a lot of fun. And I decided last year that, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna dive in and I'm gonna build my own keyboard. And just for the sake of transparency, a few of these parts in this build were given to me as Christmas gifts by my mom. So shout out to my mom. Can we get some thanks, Mom, in the comments down below? I think that'd be pretty funny. I should also clarify that this is not intended to be a tutorial on custom mechanical keyboards. I am not knowledgeable enough to create said tutorials. Think of this video as more of an entry point, because that's really all I'm qualified to give. So to build a custom mechanical keyboard, you gotta understand the parts of a keyboard. You got the case, you got the plate, you got the PCB, you got the switches, and you got the stabilizers. The case and PCB seem relatively obvious. The case is what holds the actual keyboard together, and the PCB is essentially the circuit board that connects all the switches to your computer. And keycaps are also pretty easy to understand. They're the little plastic caps that go on top of every individual switch. The plate sort of acts like an anchor point and almost like a cushion for the switches on your PCB. However, there are some keyboards that do go plateless, so I also forgot to mention the key switches. They're the actual physical switch that's inside the keyboard that you press, and they're the button that makes keyboard happen, yeah. And last but not least are the stabilizers. So if you actually take your spacebar keycap or like your shift or your enter keycap off of the switch, you'll notice that there are a couple extra little points that the keycap rests on, and that is the stabilizer. It's basically just like a metal wire with a couple other points that your keycap can rest on, just so that it can stabilize the longer keys on your keyboard. So now that we have at least a basic idea of what actually goes inside of a mechanical keyboard, we can actually start doing some research and see where we can buy some parts. And this is when I learned the unfortunate truth about custom mechanical keyboards. It's really fucking hard to find parts. Well, that's not entirely true. There are some parts that are in stock pretty much all the time, but if you want something like really luxurious, most of the time when you see someone buying a mechanical keyboard, it usually runs under what's called a group buy. You're essentially pre-ordering parts, and once that time limit for pre-orders ends, or they've sold all the units that they're gonna sell, well, it's kinda up in the air whether or not there'll actually be any more parts for you to get. If you miss it, you miss it. Or you can catch whoever's flipping those parts on the aftermarket. And I didn't want to deal with group buys or the long wait times or the aftermarket or any of that. Because if I was going to go on the aftermarket, I'd be paying double, maybe even triple what those parts initially sold for. And custom mechanical keyboards can get really goddamn expensive. And I thought, alright, I'm going to buy these parts, they got to be in stock, and I'm just going to kind of go for whatever. And I knew that I wanted this layout of keyboard specifically. This is what's known as a TKL, or an 80% keyboard. There's a whole lot of different layouts of keyboards, and I'm not going to go into that here. If you want more info on that, there's plenty of videos out there that explain it, so let's just move on. I knew I wanted this layout, though, so find something with this layout, find it in stock, preferably an all-aluminum case. You know, that'd be really nice, wouldn't it? And so my research eventually led me to the Idleball Id87v2. And I got it on drop.com. It's an all-aluminum case with an integrated aluminum plate, we'll get to that in a second, an acrylic bottom, underglow, rewritable RGB, and something known as hot swap sockets. Ah, fuck, I forgot to explain hot swap. Okay, so there are two types of PCBs. There's the solderable and the hot swap. Solderable means you have to solder each and every individual switch inside the PCB, and that is extremely time-consuming, and I don't have a good soldering iron, and I don't have a whole lot of experience with soldering, so I just didn't want to deal with it. So instead, you can get what's called a hot swap PCB, where it's just pre-built with what are known as hot swap sockets, where you can just place a switch in and pull it out whenever you want, and you can just hot swap them. Pretty much everybody in the keyboard scene recommends that if you're building your first keyboard, definitely go with hot swap, and oh, I'm so glad I went with hot swap, but I've got some problems with this keyboard, and we'll get to that, but I also knew that I wanted to go for like a white and green sort of motif going, because that's just one of my favorite color combinations. And so I looked on a website called KBD Fans, and I found myself a set of keycaps that is very nice, and it's got this sort of like beige-ish, off-whitish, with the nice deeper green keycaps and everything, and it just looks really nice. They look really, really nice. And so for Christmas, I was given the keyboard and the keycaps, but I didn't have any switches. And that's partially because I wanted to buy the switches and some of the tools myself, and also because I couldn't choose what switches I wanted. So what I did is I got this thing, a key switch tester, where it's just got a bunch of different key switches in it, and it just lets me, you know, press all these switches and figure out what switch I like, so I don't have to just make a blind guess on some storefront somewhere. Oh god, there's so much information in this video. Okay, so there are three kinds of keyboard key switches out there. There are the linears, the tactiles, and the clickies. Linears feel smooth and consistent all across the key press. Tactile switches have a very noticeable bump, a tactile bump. And clicky switches, the switch that's inside this keyboard, well, they're like tactiles, but they just won't shut up. And when I was doing my research on this and trying to decide what key switch I wanted, I knew I didn't want clickies. Partially because that Logitech keyboard just got really annoying, and also because when I would record with that keyboard, I would always hear the key switches being picked up by the microphone, so I just wanted to avoid that completely. Or at least mitigate it if I could. And I didn't want linears because I really like the tactile feedback of the clicky switches, but I just wanted them to shut up. So, tactile gang rise up. Okay, so back to this. This is a tactile key switch tester. And after a while of playing around with this key switch tester, I eventually decided on the TTC bluish whites. I like how noticeable the tactile bump is, and I'm also a fan of how relatively silent they are. They're nowhere near on the same level as like a Kale Silent Box Brown or any linear switch, but they're definitely quieter than those Logitech blue switches over there. So let's just run down the list and recap everything that we have so far. We got the Idleball keyboard that has a case and a PCB and an integrated plate, meaning that you can't separate the plate from the board, so you can't really customize it a whole lot, but whatever. We got the keycaps and we got the switches. Okay, so we should be ready to build a keyboard, right? Well, it seems like anytime I try to delve into a new hobby or a new community, there's always like 7 million gotchas. While I was doing more research on the Idleball keyboard, I come to find out that the stabilizers that the keyboard comes with are not great. So, that's fine. That's okay. all right, maybe the stabilizers aren't as bad as everybody says. Maybe I don't need to worry. Maybe I don't need to get in. Oh. Yeah, once I put together the keyboard in sort of like a test build, a prototype build as it were, yeah, those stabilizers weren't great. So I did some research, and turns out the integrated plate in the Idleball keyboard means that there are clearance issues with a ton of the aftermarket stabilizers you can get. What the fuck does this mean? It means that a ton of stabilizers just wouldn't fit inside this keyboard. So, great. Am I just stuck with the shitty Idleball stabilizers? Well, I did a little bit more research, and it turns out these genuine cherry stabs are said to be able to fit. So I thought, okay, I ordered the stabilizers, and I had the keyboard, I had the switches, I had the new stabs, I had everything that I needed to make this board become a reality. Well, let's listen to that initial sound test again. That board sounds real fucking hollow, doesn't it? And you really don't want that kind of a hollow sound inside of a board that costs like $300, okay? So, what I did is I got this roll of clear plastic to try to just fill the board out and try to have sort of a dampening effect inside of it, just to make it sound a little bit less hollow. And I also did this to try to preserve the underglow, but we'll get into why the underglow really doesn't matter later. Okay, got the keyboard, okay? We got the new stabilizers. We got the keycaps. We got the switches. Oh shit, we need to buy lube. Okay, we're getting into the weeds now. We have to understand lubing parts inside a keyboard. All right, stick with me on this. Let's listen to that initial sound test again. Did you notice that when I'm mashing on those long keys like backspace or spacebar or shift, that there's a whole lot of rattle? Take another listen. Maybe you'll notice it this time. It's a bit annoying, and you know what? I can actually demonstrate this right now because these stabilizers have no lube on them at all. See, I'm just running my finger across the spacebar, and you can hear it make noise. When on a well-made board, you're not going to hear any of that. You might have heard a little bit coming from something like the keycap, but you're not going to hear any noise coming from the stabilizers. Nice and lubricated to prevent excess noise. And of course, because it's custom mechanical keyboards, there's like an infinite number of different kinds of lubes and how viscous the lube is and what the lube is being used for and why you would use certain lubes with other things, and there's a lot of information to absorb, and I realize I'm doing a very terrible job conveying a lot of this information, but I'm mostly trying to save you from the headache that I had to go through to properly understand everything that goes on in this hobby. If you want some like actual good information and someone who knows how to convey this information, again, there are links in the description to people who know what they're talking about. And watching these videos led me to understand that Krytox 205 Grade 0 is a pretty good lube. It'll work for stabilizers, it'll work for key switches, it'll work for whatever you throw at it. So, question. This keyboard here has 87 switches in it. Do I need to open all 87 of these switches and lube them myself? Well, I'm in luck actually in this case. Because these are tactile switches, you don't necessarily need to lube them. And also the bluish whites came factory lubed. And I know a lot of hardcore keyboard creators are gonna look at me not lubing my switches myself and think like, oh, you know, his board is just gonna be inferior and all this other garbage. But I just wanted to save myself a little bit of sanity. And truth be told, I did lube one of the switches on my own just to know and just to understand. And I tested how they sounded with my lube and the factory lube, and I didn't really hear a whole lot of difference. Now, lubing your switches actually comes more into play if you have a linear switch, because you want to make it as smooth and even as possible. But with tactiles, you can pretty much hide a lot of the scratchiness or roughness of a key press behind the tactile event. And the TTC bluish whites have a pretty noticeable tactile event, unlike something like a Cherry MX Brown. So taking all that information in, we can come to the conclusion that I'm not gonna fucking do that. I'm not gonna lube my switches. Fuck that. That sounds too much. That's too much for me. What is this, like the third recap we've done in this video? We got the keyboard, we got the switches, we got the lube, we got the replacement stabilizers, we got the keycaps, we got the fucking everything. Okay, are we finally ready to build a fucking keyboard? I think we are. And so, I actually streamed this entire build live on twitch.tv/pav_live. And if you want to see the VOD of this stream, there will be a link to that down below as well. So many links, so much information to pack into one video. How long have I been filming for? 45 minutes. Fuck. I'm just really trying to convey all the information that I had to absorb to make this video happen. So I took apart the keyboard, took off the shitty Idleball stabilizers, and started lubing all the Cherry stabilizers, which was actually pretty relaxing, honestly. I put on some nice jazzy Nintendo music, and we just vibed. We just chilled out in a VC, and we're just talking about like Linux and shit, right? But of course, you know, it's me. Something's gotta go wrong. Something's gotta get fucked up. Some scuffed shit's bound to happen. When I actually attached the stabilizers to the PCB and attempted to put that PCB inside of the integrated plate of this keyboard, it didn't fit. Because of course it didn't. And after a good amount of time of trial and error and trying to understand what's going on and not really being able to fully understand what was going on because of the integrated plate blocking everything, I came to the conclusion that I need to take off all the stabilizers and just clip them. And just take a pair of nail clippers and just cut off the excess plastic. And I thought at the beginning of this that I would just need to cut a little bit off. You know, I need to carve just a little bit of plastic here and there. You know, I'm not really gonna need to take off a whole lot of plastic. You know, I feel like that would kind of ruin the integrity of the stabilizer if I took off too much. I don't want to ruin these things I just spent all this money and time on. No. After shaving a little bit of plastic off, still didn't fit. So I tried to go even further. Still didn't fit. Tried to go further. Still didn't fit. This went on for a solid like 30 minutes to an hour of the stream. Just trying to trim these stabilizers down. And it got really old really fast. And so, eventually, I'm just like, fuck it, alright? I'm just going ham on these fucking stabilizers, and I'm cutting off as much plastic as I can possibly allow. And eventually, I was able to get the stabilizers to finally fit inside of the case. Huzzah! I've built the keyboard. And now that it's finally all built, with the lubed stabilizers, and the nice keycaps, and the nice tactile switches, and everything is finally put together, wait, shit, it still sounds really hollow. And that's when this plastic comes into play. I cut down some pieces of it, and I shaved it all down so it would fit inside of the keyboard, and so it definitely sounds better. It sounds a little hollow in some places, but way better than if it was just empty. But there's also a few well-known mods in the keyboard scene, most notably the Tempest Mod or the Tape Mod. To do the Tempest Mod, you just need a roll of painter's tape, and you just layer painter's tape on the bottom of your keyboard's PCB. And for some reason, it just helps out with the sound signature of the board. I don't fucking understand why, and I was an audio engineer on a movie once. So I did do the Tempest Mod of my own. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, gee, Pav, this board has underglow to it, right? So you've got LEDs all along the bottom side of the PCB. Wouldn't layering painter's tape on the back of the PCB also completely cover up the underglow of the board and just render all that stuff useless? Yeah, pretty much. And the reason why I was okay with this is just because when I put my computer to sleep at night, the underglow doesn't turn off. So I would need to unplug the board. And, I mean, I could just turn my computer off, but like... So I thought to myself, you know what? I'll make the board sound a little bit nicer, and I just won't have to worry about all that underglow and everything. I thought it was okay. Truth be told, I'm still kind of not a fan of how this spacebar sounds. Like, I feel like it could sound better. I should also point out that this thing is like solid aluminum for most of the body, and it's got a brass weight on the bottom. This thing's heavy. This fucker's heavy. I could kill someone with this. Okay, in conclusion, this was a gigantic waste of time and money and effort. And it was so fucking worth it. Oh my god, this board feels amazing. I love typing on this board and gaming on it and doing all this stuff like this. Ooh, this is a like 3,000% upgrade from this, name brand piece of garbage. Like, just I can't use that board anymore. I have to build another keyboard to use on Frankenpav out there. It's so fucking nice, dude. And in actually building this board and doing the research for everything and this whole, couple of months of research and development that led to this board, I actually gained a little bit more knowledge about myself, strangely enough. I have determined that I am not so much a software enthusiast, but more a hardware enthusiast. Meaning that I just enjoy putting things together and playing with physical hardware, rather than sitting in a terminal and punching in commands all day like I'm some sort of monkey. Like, that comparison in and of itself can tell you that I'm not much of a fan of developing software. So being able to delve into this new hobby and actually find something new to put together and figure out all this hardware and learn a bunch more stuff about this really niche community that just is really fucking cool most of the time, genuinely, and being able to put this keyboard together, and it was just so much fun. I would recommend that if you're interested in building a keyboard, you do that, but probably don't spend $350 on your first keyboard. Maybe go with something cheaper. There's plenty of cheap keyboard parts out there. They're not going to be nearly as nice as this, but it'll definitely get your feet wet. And honestly, like, just even looking at this board, right? This board costs $130 on Amazon. Like, all right, you know what? Here, tell me in the comments. Do you want to see me build a custom mechanical keyboard for $100 or less? Because I can do that. I can totally do that. So let me know if you want to see that build happen. That'd be a lot of fun, I feel. And with all that being said, I want to give a special shout out at the end of this video to the executive lads, otherwise known as my patrons. And I actually want to give a shout out to all the new patrons out there who recently joined. This list is growing a little bit, and it's really cool to see. And it's nice to sort of see people look at my content and think, yeah, he's worth throwing money at. New concept to me, this feeling that I get from looking at this list. But, I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody who watches these videos and donates on Patreon or whatever you do to support my channel, even if it's not direct or monetary. If you would like to become a patron, there will be a link at the end of this video and in the description down below, where you'll gain access to bonus videos and behind-the-scenes content and exclusive other things and these fancy shout-outs and big colored names on my Discord server and all that fun stuff. And speaking of bonus content, this week's video is actually going to be a patron-exclusive Let's Play. I'm going to be playing the PC Boomer Shooter Dusk with this exact keyboard, and I'm going to be talking about just how it feels to game on this keyboard and how it feels to game on Linux and all that sort of stuff. I gotta tie it all back to Linux at some point, right? But yeah, if you want to watch that Let's Play of me playing Dusk with this keyboard, there'll be a hand cam in the video too, so you can see my hands at work while I play the game, or if that interests you, I don't fucking know. That'll be on the Patreon, and all you gotta do is pay $1 and you can access that video and all the other Patreon exclusive content. Thanks again to the patrons. Thank you for watching this video, and I'm bad at ending videos, so have a good night, everybody.